In this video, I'm going to teach you how to design your very first workout program as somebody who's new to the gym. Let's get into it. Okay, so step number one, you have to involve full body. A lot of people, when they start, they tend to lean more towards hitting the muscle groups that they enjoy the most. So let's just say chest, arms, shoulders, those are the typical ones. And most people do that only because those are the showing muscles. Those are the ones that most people notice. So when you just start growing, the first thing people will see, is if you're growing some nice bolder shoulders, if your chest is kind of growing in your shirts, you can see it. There's a definite tell, and that tends to be the focus for most people. So I urge you to focus on the big picture, because those muscles are nice to see, but without the rest of the body being in better shape, then you risk kind of looking funny. And I mean, in an ideal world, you get to look exactly how you want to look, and that usually involves doing everything. So let's get into how you can design the program to make sure that you hit every muscle. You cannot forget the legs. Legs are half your body, and too often I see guys coming in and they hit upper body 4 or 5 times a week, and then sometimes they don't even get to legs. You don't want to be that guy. And I'm not saying that necessarily just because it looks funny. Like, nobody wants to be an upside down Dorito, but there is some extra growth that comes with training legs. And there used to be an argument that people had said, you boost your testosterone when you train your legs. Unfortunately, I don't really think that that's true anymore. I think it's been debunked. Don't quote me on this. But I think it's better for you to train everything, just because you look better when you have everything. You don't want to look like you have giant arms, giant chest, giant shoulders, big back, and then you have to wear the baggiest pants ever because you're embarrassed about people seeing your legs. Okay, so when it comes to training, focus on legs. There are a lot of areas that you need to work. So you got your quads, you got your hamstrings, you got your calves, and you cannot forget the glutes. Okay, some people are just gifted in a sense that maybe they have big calves naturally. Some people have better genetics for their glutes. You fall in one of those categories. You might not fall into any of those categories, so you might have to work extra hard just to get what you're looking to get. Okay, so when you're training your legs, do your quads, do your hamstrings, get your calves, and get your glutes. You don't want to focus on one more than the other necessarily, so try to have an even approach. So when you're making your plan, aim for something like 2 exercises for each. So in an ideal world, you would do something like a leg press and a leg extension for your quads. Then you move on to hamstrings, and you would hit some seated leg curls and then some lying leg curls. And then when you get into calves, you would do something like standing calves and seated calves. And then when you're doing your glutes, you kind of hit them when you're doing your leg presses or your squats and stuff like that. So as long as you're not neglecting them, you don't necessarily need to focus on them 100% in their own separate workouts, unless you really, really lack in glutes. So take that into consideration, and maybe start doing some glute specific exercises. Okay, please keep in mind that I'm not giving these exercises in any order that I think is the most important to the least important. I'm just kind of giving you how to design each part. Okay, so the next one is back. Back is probably the largest muscle you have. It's huge in comparison to the rest. So a lot of people lean towards deadlifting when they first start. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of deadlifts because they have the highest risk for injury, but they do have a very high risk for reward ratio. So when you're really trying to make strides, deadlifts are actually a very good choice, as long as you can learn how to do them properly, which unfortunately most people do not. So when you're training your back, make sure you hit everything from every angle possible. So you got to do your pull downs, you got to do your rows, and then you got to do your raises. Okay, so you want to hit everything from every angle. You don't want to miss anything, and everything is just as important as the other because you need to build something that is symmetrical. So some examples for exercises are your classic pull downs. You got your seated rows, and you can do some of the, I'm not sure if anybody would know this, but a Yates row, which essentially is you're almost standing up straight and you're doing a bent over row instead of, doing the classic bending over. So those are really good options for back. Those are very, very basic, but when you're just starting out, those will usually be enough for you. Then we get into chest. So chest is, in my opinion, the third biggest muscle group that you're going to want to focus on. So obviously you got your legs, you got your back, and then you get your chest. Those are normally the three biggest groups. So when you're doing your chest, you want to hit every single angle. You don't want to focus on just one, because then you risk having less development than you're going to want to see in general. So for example, you have to do your incline chest movements, you have to do your flat chest movements, and yes, you should do your decline chest movements as well. I think it's very important to hit all three because you really want to develop a nice pelican chest, and you're not going to do that if you just hit flat every single time you go in for your bench or for your chest workouts. And you definitely need to develop that as you go, and the best way to do that is to hit all three. So for example, you can do some incline chest flies with dumbbells. Then you can move into a flat bench press. I personally like doing the dumbbell press when I'm using a flat bench. I just feel more comfortable with that. So you'll have to learn and find what you enjoy and what works best for you. And then when it comes to decline, I enjoy doing a decline bench press. You can load up a lot of weight, and the angle that you're sitting when you're doing decline allows you to push a lot of weight. So usually I stick to a bench press for that. So those are some options for you. You get to choose, obviously, so you don't have to do anything that you don't want to do. Sometimes these exercises might hurt you in a certain way, and I would definitely suggest not doing anything if it's painful, in the kind of painful way that is obviously not okay. I'm not talking about the muscle burn. You need to feel that lactic acid in your muscles. But if you feel like something's coming out, something's stretching too much, whatever the case is, then probably would be best to avoid doing that workout, because you have a ton of choices, and you don't necessarily have to pick one just because somebody else is telling you to do that specific exercise. Next comes shoulders. So shoulders really are a very good telltale sign of somebody who's in great shape. Most of the time guys will have big arms and maybe a big chest, but if they don't have that nice round set of shoulders that fills in their shirts, then I don't want to say you look weird, but you definitely don't look as impressive as somebody who has, full, well-developed round shoulders. So do not neglect the shoulders, but also don't train them more than anything else. Everything should be trained equally, because that's how you develop something symmetrical and something, beautiful, right? And I assume that's what you want. So when you're training your shoulders, make sure you hit every single head. There's 3 portions to your shoulder. You can call it the front, the side, and the back. When you're training them, make sure you do your front raises, so you can just lift your arms straight up. You can do your side raises, and then you can bend over, and then you can use your rear delts when you fly. Same motions. Don't skip any of these, because if you have one that's bigger than the other, it will eventually look silly, and you really want to develop that full round shoulder, and you're only going to do that if you hit every single head in your shoulder. Next, we have arms. Arms usually come pretty easy for most guys. They're usually the most enjoyable, and they're the most noticeable. When you're wearing a t-shirt, when you're out with your friends or whatever, they kind of get attention if you have a nice bicep vein or some nice sized arms, period. So if you're looking to grow your arms, definitely hit every part of each muscle. So your bicep has 2 parts, so the inside and the outside. Bicep obviously meaning 2. So you want to train your arms by doing some curls with a focus on your hand being closer to your body or inward, and then another focus with your arms out. Okay? And then you got your triceps. There are 3 heads to your tricep. You don't want to miss any of them, because then you kind of have a lack of development. So you got to make sure you do your overheads, you got to do your straight downs, and you have to do your in fronts. Okay, that's the easiest way for me to explain it to you. I'm not going to get into scientific terms. I think you'll be able to gather enough information from that and train your triceps. So don't miss any part of it. Make sure you hit each part of each muscle. And again, these don't need more attention than other groups. Everything should be trained equally, in my opinion. And then last we have abs. So with abs, they can handle a lot. They can definitely take a beating. So I would personally say stick with some higher rep ab volume. Don't use too much weight because unfortunately, if you train your abs with too much weight, you end up actually building them and they kind of stick out. And I know a couple of guys that I grew up with who they were avid ab trainers because they wanted to have that nice six pack as they were growing. But it actually played not in their favor because they trained them so much that they started to grow outwards. So when they would wear a shirt, it actually looked like they had a belly. And obviously when they lifted it, they had, nice abs, but that I don't think that's a good trade-off. I think it's better to have like a flat stomach. So when you do end up starting to fill your shirt out, you kind of look like the bottom of your shirt has more space. It's not so tight against your belly. It's more of an appealing look in my opinion. So train abs, and I'm not saying never use weight. I'm just saying don't always use weight and don't always train them with heavy weight. That's what's going to cause them to grow. You need them to be a little bit bigger than what they might be now, just so they can have that definition and that development. But when it comes to being able to see them, that's more of a diet thing than it is a training thing. Obviously, you need to have trained them in order for them to look really good, but they don't need to be trained with heavy weight because then you risk kind of building them too much. And then, when you wear your shirt, you look like you have a gut. And I don't want that. I'm sure you don't want that. So I'm pretty sure I covered everything. Again, make sure that you train everything equally. You don't want to have giant arms and no chest, and you don't want to have giant shoulders and no legs. It's important to build everything together, especially when you're starting off as a smaller person. As a skinny guy, when I started myself, ideally I didn't want to build something that was only in one area. I tried my best to kind of grow everywhere. It might sound easier than it is. It definitely is difficult, and I'm not going to say that it's super easy to develop something that's really, really nice. But you want to make sure that you hit everything so that when you do start to grow, you start to grow nicely and with proper, proportion. So I hope this video helps you. Feel free to comment below if you have any questions or if you disagree or if you agree, and stay tuned for the next one.